Hello there, and welcome to the show. I look forward to my Tuesday conversations with Eric Peters as much as I look forward to a good night's sleep. The difference being, I rarely get a good night's sleep, but at least on Tuesdays, I get to talk to you, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I too feel like a creature of the night as a result of everything that's going on. I'm now getting up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning to try to anticipate what's going on and try to make some sense of it. I also feel as if, again, it's deja vu and we're going through COVID all over again. You remember when we had to try to find out what was actually going on, what the truth was? And it was really difficult because all the mainstream, I love the way they use that term, the general platforms were suppressing the true news, the true facts, and leaving us to sort of pick through the rubble to try to find out what was actually going on. And I feel that the same, only worse, is going on right now. I feel as though it's almost impossible to get any sense of what's actually happening over in the Middle East. I look at X and these other social media platforms, and it's just a sea of what appears to be AI generated slop, and everything else gets deleted. Almost as soon as you see it, it just goes away.
Well, and you and I have lived long enough. We understand truth is always the first casualty in times of war. But I mean, even I'm sorry, I mean, I'm going to criticize our own leaders, Pete Hegseth, President Trump, all through that chain of command. There is so much double talk and so much just posturing that has no basis. We're not at war. I think Speaker Mike Johnson was one of those too. We're not at war. This is not war, and yet, well, they've declared war on us, but it's not war. It's Orwellian, to put it mildly.
Sure, and of course, the Iranians are the ones who bombed their own school where 170 girls were killed. Apparently, it is beyond surreal. And the thing that has me worried most right now is I feel as if they have painted us into a corner. Trump's arrogant narcissism and his desire to be seen as the spray tan Caesar is not coming to pass. The Iranians are holding their own, which is all they have to do. They don't have to quote unquote win; they just have to survive. If they survive, it will show that the U.S. and Israel have a glass jaw, and that can't be abided. So, what are they going to do? Are they going to send 500,000 ground troops to occupy Iran? We don't have 500,000 ground troops. Never mind that the American people probably, I hope to God, would never put up with sending their sons and daughters to go fight and die for Israel in Iran. So, what next? What will happen? Well, the thing that worries me the most is that some maniac on one side or the other is going to push the button, and then it's all over.
No, I'm with you. It's the way, and again, I say this with the understanding. I don't know, what is real and what isn't real. Some of the videos I can sense that, what, that looks computer generated, or the explosion or the plumes of smoke or the fireworks like effect. That doesn't look realistic, but I can't honestly say that I know for sure what's going on. Now, I have heard that Israel, for instance, is saying they will put people in prison for 5 years if they share um, footage of what Iran, whatever damage Iran has been able to inflict on them. And it's all couched under, it's all national security and, it's operational security. You don't give away anything to the enemy. But at the same time, here in America, we've got people just freaking out that, hey, you're not cheering for our team. Why aren't you waving the flag and cheering louder?
Sure.
Really? You really expect that after not only after COVID, but after the Iraq war 23 years ago, we're supposed to step up and believe, what the people in power are saying. I thought
Mhm.
some of us had a chance to learn that lesson.
It's incredible, isn't it? And they're gaslighting the Iranians for attacking American bases in the region. It's the very bases that were used to attack Iran. Like they're just supposed to lay there on the ground and accept whatever pummeling we dish out to them. And if they don't, then somehow they're the ones that are culpable. And again, it just brings me back to why. Why is this happening? The cost of gas now apparently is up about 50 cents nationwide, according to what I've been able to figure out. But the other aspect of the story that's not being covered adequately is the cost of diesel fuel. Diesel fuel, at least in my area, it's almost $5 a gallon. And I understand that in other parts of the country, it's even higher than that. And people should stop to reflect and think about, how does the stuff get to the supermarket? How does the stuff get to Walmart? Well, it gets there from trucks that burn diesel and diesel electric locomotives. So, in addition to paying substantially more for fuel, you're going to be paying substantially more for everything else in the very near future. And this is politically and economically catastrophic for this country.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere, I think it was over the weekend, that the price of a barrel of oil was the second highest it had ever been. They referenced 2008, I think, and I remember that's when gas was closing in on $5 a gallon. And I clearly remember how many businesses said, we can't do it, and shut their doors or laid people off because they felt the economic pinch. I mean, it's we have you said it very well. We painted ourselves into a corner, and Iran does not have to conquer and hold the land of the United States in order to win. All they have to do is wear down the powers that are attacking them by making their economies so poor that the people can't stand it anymore. I think it's going to be very interesting come November, to put it mildly.
If we get that far. And I take my hat off to them because I think they did anticipate that this was likely to occur. There was something so profoundly seedy, disingenuous, and in my opinion, criminal of these so-called negotiations that preceded the attack, where they sent two arch Zionists, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who hate the Iranians and want the war. They're not honest brokers. And I think the Iranians got that. And in any event, it's a dastardly thing to do. You remember, to people who read history, everybody got their panties in a bunch, understandably, when the Japanese sneak attacked, the base at Pearl Harbor, because it's just not cool to do that. It's not acting in good faith. And that's exactly what we have done, violating all civilized norms of conduct, that you just go ahead and attack in the middle of negotiations. That's not the sort of thing that this country is, at least in theory, supposed to do. Anyway, I think the Iranians were aware that that was going to come. I think they had ample warning, and I think they prepared. And I don't think there's anything that we can do about it. This is not my view entirely. I base my view on people smarter than me and more learned than me in the subject, such as Colonel McGregor, who I recommend everybody listening to follow
Yeah,
him
he's a
because
good
the
one.
man knows what he's talking about and has good sources. Says that there's not, short of sending in 500,000 ground troops and possibly nuking the country, it's not a winnable war.
And even then, you want to preside over ashes? Great. That's good victory. We all feel safer now. But, one of the biggest sources of hypocrisy that I've seen recently was there was talk about, well, the U.S. is asking Russia not to share intel with Iran. Because that intel is being used to target air bases and things like that around the Middle East. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure Russia will get right on that. Now that the U.S. isn't sending intel to Ukraine. Oh, they are. It just,
It's
I think
astounding.
there's a word for that. Is it chutzpah?
Yeah, and also contempt, contemptuousness, because I mean they obviously think that Putin is an imbecile. Why would Putin agree to partner with and help this regime that clearly wants to topple him, obviously, and has been trying to topple him since when was that so-called Maidan or color revolution that occurred in which they installed Zelensky? This
Yep.
has been an ongoing thing. It's preposterous. The teeth, the fangs have been bared. All pretenses are gone. The U.S. government, Trump personally threatens Spain if Spain would not permit the American military to use it as a landing point for its operations in Iran and making them complicit in all of this awful, dirty business. It's got to stop. And I find myself, as horrible as this is to say, rooting for the Iranians in this thing. I feel that if they manage to somehow survive it, they may have just thrown a wrench into the works, and maybe we'll be able to do something about this pathological, insane support for Israel uber alles, no matter what Israel does.
No, I'm with you, and I found myself, the same way, going, why is it that I actually kind of I want the U.S. and these other countries, Israel included, who are trying to provoke this conflict. I want them to fail, not because I hate my country. I'm making a distinction between my country and my government. But the people who are pushing this madness on the world, I want them to fail as hard as possible and then be separated from power as permanently as possible.
Yeah, which may well happen. Now, to get back to what's going on, the thing that has me up at nights, and I'm being very serious here about this, is that I think Trump may have already played out the scenario and he understands that he's going to be repudiated, or at least his party is going to be repudiated violently come the midterms. And there aren't going to be any midterms. I foresee that this war is going to go on. Trump will declare an emergency, particularly if there's some event that occurs in America, which they can then say is the result of the Iranians. and there won't be any elections. He's openly expressed admiration for Zelensky, who became a dictator by declaring an emergency, and still calls himself the president, but he's a dictator. I think Trump very much would love to be the dictator, frankly. I know that makes me
Well,
sound like a blue-haired liberal, blah blah blah. But the fact is, if anybody can't see Trump's clearly evident authoritarian streak, I don't know what to say to them.
well, and the CIA started planting seeds just a couple of days ago with the release of this. Well, there may be Iranian sleeper cells being activated in the U.S. And look, there may be, but what I see and what I hear is someone is trying to make us very afraid, and maybe there will be a mass shooting or there will be some kind of attack. I mean, the two ISIS bozos who were throwing homemade, bombs at
Yep.
Mamdami's residence the other day. For crying out loud, this is where we have to be careful not to be led along by a little ring through our noses and to be made afraid of everything. Now, I take my personal protection seriously, and if you're standing near me, you're standing near someone who's armed, pretty much anywhere. But it just sounds like they're trying to get us conditioned to believe, well, these cells could be anywhere, and would that not justify, well, we have to declare martial law because we don't know where the threat is. It could be anybody, which means we all get treated as if we are potential terrorists because that's how the national security state operates.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it is going to take something more than a mass shooting. I don't think I think people have gotten kind of inured to that sort of a thing. I think it will take something comparable to what happened on 9/11. For example, what if a major American city suffers a radiological attack from a dirty bomb?
Right.
And then they say it was the ululating Islamists that did that. Never mind who might actually have done it. I think that the public will immediately start playing the Lee Greenwood song and humping their flags. And before you know it, people like you and I will be considered treasonous traitors for daring to raise our hands and say, who benefits from all of this?
Yeah, it's a dangerous and interesting time, but again, I'm gonna say I'm talking the talk here, but I have walked the walk and intend to do so moving forward. A person has to be okay with being out of step with the majority of society on cases like this. Sometimes the most patriotic and principled thing you can do is the exact opposite of what the majority is doing. And if they're all waving the flag and chanting Toby Keith slogans, sometimes the best thing to do is not be a part of that crowd.
Yeah, you have said something that I thought bears repeating over and over, which is when people try to I'm paraphrasing you, you'll end up saying it better than I did. But when they try to make you scared, be suspicious of the people that are trying to make you scared.
Yep. Yep. It's not well, you're just being unreasonable or your head is in the sand. Look, we've been lied to before. And you had mentioned earlier in our conversation, shades of COVID. When I'm trying to find out what's going on, and it appears that real information, or at least credible information, verifiable stuff, is being throttled. Yeah, we've been here before, and that was a really ugly place to be because even now there are still people who maintain, oh, they did everything they had to do, for for the pandemic, and the people who are in power say, well, we did what was required of us, and we had no other choice. It's like, no, you saw no other choice. There were always choices.
Right now, the difficulty is that we still have a lot of independent. We have a lot of independent people now, like you and I and Joe Rogan and a bunch of other people. The problem is that we don't have the means to go over to the Middle East and report on what's going on over there. In the past, when we had a sort of functioning press, you actually had reporters that were sent over there on the ground and to report back. Dan Rather famously during the Vietnam War, and so on. And that sort of thing is gone. Heck, even during the Gulf War, there was media presence there and ongoing reporting. Now it's pure, blatant propaganda, pro-regime propaganda emanating from Fox News and CNN and all the usual suspects. And it's just so blatant, it's so bad, it's become utterly unwatchable.
Yep. And this is probably as much for me as it is for anybody, but um, don't get caught up in the doom scrolling cycle. Yeah, I know it's easy to do, and especially when there's some kind of shocking footage. Oh my goodness, there's a ship blowing up. I've watched way too many Michael Bay movies, and I still, whoa, explosions, car chases. But it's so easy to get pulled into that, and then the algorithm starts reading your mood and starts manipulating. Oh, well, you want to see that? Here's some more. Here's some more. And you can end up feeling hopeless in a pretty short amount of time, or maybe even a long amount of time, depending on how well it captures your attention. Um, Run in the other direction when you find yourself tempted to sit there and keep on scrolling. Put the phone down, walk outside, touch grass, as the kids would say, and don't allow yourself to be drawn into that mental web.
My hope is that what's going on right now will thoroughly delegitimize certain platforms, including X. There are a lot of people out there who still see it as some sort of free speech venue where we can find out what's actually going on. It isn't. Elon Musk is a technocrat. He's not your friend. Stop it. Divorce yourself from these sorts of things and rely on people who you know are trustworthy. Stop dealing with these mass scale corporate entities that are trying to prevent us from knowing what's actually going on and trying to direct our thoughts along certain channels.
What about Substack? I think you had mentioned that before we
Yeah.
went on the air. What's your take on that?
Well, apparently, and I haven't had a chance to delve into this a lot yet this morning, but in other countries, and I think it's Australia and Europe, they are beginning to limit what people can post on Substack unless you provide your digital ID, in the name of protecting the children. They don't want anybody
Oh,
who's under 16 to have access to this, whatever they consider to be, sensitive or objectionable information. And it's going to wind up being a situation where probably you're not going to be able to use the internet unless you provide your digital ID. And then they are going to be able to know every keystroke you make, if they don't already. But they'll literally be able to know every website that you've gone to, every article that you've read, every video that you've watched. And then, moving farther a little bit down the road, when they impose their social credit regime and their digitized money, the instant that you view something that's considered wrong thinkful, you'll be throttled back in terms of what you're allowed to buy or where you're allowed to go and all of this. The net is cinching tight. And don't forget that it was Trump who, within a week of having been inaugurated, had a big festival at the White House with Larry Ellison and these other tech bros. That should have been our clue that bad things were to come. Unfortunately, I let that pass. I got caught up in the Doge, good feelings, the hopium, and all of that. It lasted a
as did
couple of
I.
yeah, and it was a nice high while it lasted, like being out with your buddies drinking one night. But then the next day the hangover sometimes is, as they say, a B.
So let's talk automotive stuff here for just a moment. And I want to preface this with I attended a training over the weekend, about 8 hours of hardcore political campaign boot camp. I guess I could probably break the news now. I'm officially a candidate for the Idaho State Senate. Not willingly so much as I was, my conscience more or less drafted me. That's a story for another time. But part of that training was that I was noticing the people were presenting it. It was from the Leadership Institute, talked about the data that they have on voters. And
Mhm.
it's insane the amount of data that is available about each and every one of us and about our lives. And I think I sent you a video not too long after that about someone who was making the case for here's why you should buy 20-year-old cars and maintain
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Because in a nutshell, what they were saying is your car is nothing more than a 4,000 pound smartphone. And it's keeping
correct.
tabs on where you go and how fast you drive and who you talk to and what you listen to and perhaps even what you say. Um, that data is being scooped up, and it was really shocking to make that connection and go, this is so much deeper than I had even suspected.
Yep, I've been trying to warn people about this for years. And there's a related aspect of it that people ought to be aware of. It's not merely that they know where you're going, where you've been, what your habits are. They can control your car externally.
Yep.
Vehicles that have been made since roughly about 2015 have telematics and drive-by-wire controls. Things like the throttle and the brakes are controllable externally by sending they call it an update, and they present it in a benign way. Oh, we're going to get you the very latest version of the software that runs your car, and it's going to help do this or help do that. But using that software, they can decide to just brick your car, to shut it down at any time they like. Cars that lack telematics, if you go back 20 something years, that don't have that, they are free range cars. They cannot be controlled except by physically laying hands on the car. And it may come to that, but at least in the interim, you have the ability to use it as opposed to waking up one day and noticing, well, they've thrown the virtual switch and now your car doesn't work anymore.
Even if they've thrown that switch for your safety and
For your
well-being.
safety. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you have been working on your Trans Am, and I'd like to get an update on that. this is one of the reasons my wife keeps saying, "Well, why don't we get rid of that old Tahoe?" I've got like a 2003 Chevy Tahoe, and after watching the video that I sent you, which explained why you need these 20-year-old cars, I'm never getting rid of that thing. I mean,
Yeah,
what
it's like I said, Michael, let's get rid of those old silver dimes that we've got.
who uses silver anymore? By the way, how is your Trans Am doing? I know you've sent me a few pictures, and I like what I'm seeing. Are we close to turning the key and taking
Yeah,
it
in
for a
fact,
drive?
I could have done it yesterday. Everything's finished except the last thing, the drive shaft. And I forgot, this happens when you do these projects that involve a lot of moving pieces, that the slip yoke, which is, the thing that goes onto the drive shaft that goes into the transmission, is different for the manual transmission than it was for my original automatic. So I've got the part on order. I have to wait till it gets here. Once I've got the correct slip yoke, I can put the drive shaft back in the car. I mean, I could start it probably right now, but it's not going anywhere without a drive shaft. So I'm going to wait until I get that part.
I'll tell you, from what I've seen of the pictures you've sent, it looks amazing. That shifter. I mean, I just I look forward to when you post the video of taking it out for a drive, and hope you don't have the opportunity to run into any of Virginia's finest as you're putting it through the paces.
Me too. Me too.
Eric, thanks again for taking the time to visit with me. I always feel like, you know what? Okay, my burden's a little bit lighter after I've had a chance to converse with you and commiserate. Looking forward to our conversation next week, if we're
Me too,
still
Brian.
here.
Thanks for the calm chill pill.